Let me just start off. The best moment of the night for Ron DeSantis was basically his argument, and he made this towards the end of the debate, and he should have made it towards the beginning of the debate because nobody was watching by the end of the debate because it was 2 hours long on CNN, and no one wants to watch CNN for 2 hours. But anyway, his best moment of the night was basically his argument was, what good is Trump to us if these January 6th trials are the only message of 2024? And he's not even, he didn't make the argument that Donald Trump should be convicted of any crimes or that January 6th was this monumental moment that Democrats are saying it is. But he's just simply saying, we know already that the narrative on the left is that it's, Republicans are anti-democracy and that democracy is at stake. And he's saying, if Democrats can focus in on this, what good is Donald Trump to us? If he's barred from elections, whether it's fair or not, if he's barred from elections in certain states, Colorado doesn't matter so much, but Maine, on the other hand, matters. Maine always gets at least one of that. They're one of those special states where they can split up their electoral votes, but usually at least one goes to the Republicans. And so if you're counting that out, you could be in serious trouble as a Republican. And he's basically just saying, why are we risking that? Which was very interesting. I haven't heard a single Republican make that argument. I'm not even saying that it was the right argument for DeSantis. I don't know if it was. I kind of almost need to think about it more. But he had to do something. He's losing. He's starting to lose ground with Nikki Haley, as we're going to talk about. But he's certainly losing to Donald Trump. And so what it comes down to is he has to do something drastic. And I wish that he had steered more into this. He made this argument, but it was almost like he was holding back a little bit because obviously you need Trump voters at this point in order to win the primary. And anyway, it was his best moment of the night, but if he had made it the whole night, he probably would have had a pretty good night. Some smaller notes about DeSantis. He showed some humanity at the beginning of the debate. He was pretty shaky, which is pretty normal. If you're in a high intensity situation, you're going to be a little shaky at the beginning and then get a little more confident. And you could see that with him. And I do kind of almost appreciate that about him. Obviously, you want a competent and humble and confident leader. But at the same time, to see a politician get up there and not be nervous at all almost makes you a little freaked out, like they're an alien or they've done this too much. And to see DeSantis be just a little bit nervous, it wasn't that he wasn't confident in what he was saying, but his voice was a little shaky, showed some humanity and some nerves, and I thought that was interesting because I don't know if I've really heard that from him in other forums. Guys, I've been partnered with Gulag America for a while now. Why have you not gotten their stuff yet? Go to gulagamerica.com and get their patriotic apparel. It's super high quality, guys. I super love it. It's really cheap. It's very well priced. They've got stuff for warm weather, cold weather. Go check them out. If you use my code JoshCar10, you will get 10% off. Again, that's JoshCar10 at gulagamerica.com. But his message was very clear during the night. I don't make promises, I fulfill them. That's what DeSantis talked about all night. When he attacked Donald Trump, his attack on him was, generally speaking, Donald Trump made a lot of promises. Some of them he fulfilled, a lot of them he didn't. And the ones that he called him out on, he was right. Donald Trump did not fulfill them. Talking about building a wall and having Mexico paid for it. Nobody can argue that Donald Trump did that. He didn't do it. Didn't happen. Cutting into the bureaucracy. Donald Trump did not cut the bureaucracy. In fact, he probably increased it a lot. Especially spending. Spending and bureaucracy are kind of separate issues, but growing the executive branch certainly was something that Donald Trump did and he promised not to do when he was president. DeSantis basically called for everybody. He just said, he's like, every promise that I made in my gubernatorial race, I fulfilled. And that's honestly I think that's a good message. The only problem is he's been making this message for a long time now and it's not working. To me, logically, that really resonates with me. I really like Ron DeSantis for that reason. Because even though I love people like Vivek Ramaswamy, I don't mind Donald Trump on a policy level. When it comes down to it, of all of the candidates who can look you in the eyes and say, everything I promised, I can deliver on, Ron DeSantis has the highest credibility, hands down. Even if you have a Vivek Ramaswamy saying things that maybe you even like a little bit more than Ron DeSantis, you still run that risk of not really knowing how it's going to shake out. He's never been in an executive position in the government. Ron DeSantis has. So I think that is a smart argument. Again, I don't think it's resonating with voters as well as maybe me. But, certainly couldn't hurt him. DeSantis also kept saying that this is kind of one of his weaker moments of the night. He kept on saying that Haley was caving, he kind of had this quip that he was going for over and over again, saying that Nikki Haley just caved left and right when pressure was put on her. He failed to give us examples of that. And I don't even doubt that. But people like Vivek Ramaswamy, on the other hand, this is why I missed him in this debate. He would literally just call her out for it. Like, he would talk about how, oh, by the way, Nikki Haley, you support Ukraine because you're making all this money from the military-industrial complex. Like, Ron DeSantis didn't have the brass to say that. Vivek Ramaswamy did. That's why I love him. And it was missing from that debate. You can't just say people suck at something without saying why or pointing to their history, especially when they've already been an elected official. Like, that's your ammunition, right? To look at their history and call them out for it, because government is hard. It's really hard. And at the end of the day, no one's going to be perfect. So you might as well shove in their face all the things that they've done wrong. And DeSantis didn't really do that. He wasn't very specific about it. Here was the most interesting thing that he said of the night, just about his personal policy. And I have a feeling a lot of people who, I talk about this a lot on my podcast about immigration. I think a lot of people find this very interesting. He talked about how Mexico will be paying for the wall. Like, he's going to fulfill that promise, but he actually got into specifics on how it's going to be done. And I have a few questions, but I really tend to lean towards liking this policy. Essentially what he said was that Mexicans are going to be paying remittances on coming here. And that's how Mexico, more like Mexican citizens, are going to be paying for the wall. So in other words, you have a farm in California. This farm, whether we like it or not, agriculture is mostly done by immigrants. A lot of Mexicans come over. I know this. I lived in rural Washington for 2 years, and I speak Spanish, so I know a lot of Mexicans there. And most of them were working in agriculture. Now, a lot of them were here illegally, but many of them were also here legally. They weren't citizens, but they were residents. They had green cards. They were working, and that's how they were able to be here. And so what Ron DeSantis is basically saying is, those people who want to come here because we pay much better, what they do is they usually send money back to Mexico. And what he is saying is, all the money that they make here, they're going to have to pay almost a bit of a tax. They're already paying, certain taxes, but they're going to have to pay an extra tax for being here, and all that money is going to go towards the border wall. I think this is really smart, partly because Mexico has a great incentive to allow illegal immigrants to come through. This will really cut down on their incentive to come through. My questions about this is I am curious just what that remittance will look like. And obviously you have to find some sort of balance where it's not too much of a tax, where people start being incentivized to go to other countries, because at the end of the day, we do kind of need immigrants for our agriculture. You could make an argument that Americans will fulfill that more, but as of now, Americans tend to be a lot lazier and they don't want to do that kind of work, if we're being honest with ourselves. And so, again, you just have to be careful that you're able to build that border wall, but you're not discouraging cheap labor from coming in. And at the end of the day, that's what it is. And I'm not saying it because I like it, but that is how it is. And that's why you see Democrats that are trying to get people to come over illegally, because it is cheap labor for the United States. And I'm not calling for that. I'm calling for legal labor to come across. But again, if you're going to have legal labor, they should pay remittance to the wall. And I'm just curious what that amount would be, so we don't discourage people from being able to come over legally. With that, I want to talk, excuse me, really quick, before I get to our first sponsor of the podcast, I do want to talk about a really good moment that DeSantis had as well, where he was talking about how corporate Republicans would have caved to Disney, because Nikki Haley essentially started going off on him, and there was a question asked to him about how he's handled Disney. And the angle that a lot of Republicans against DeSantis have taken is, wow, like, you're so anti-capitalism, because obviously Disney is a company. It's a U.S. company. And they're trying to make it sound like DeSantis is, anti-capital, but he had a really good rebuttal to that, which is just simply that all corporate Republicans like Nikki Haley or Chris Christie would have caved to Disney. And that is so true. Like, that's true, that if Nikki Haley or Chris Christie were the governors of Florida and they had a little bit of a battle, maybe a cultural, social battle, just like DeSantis is having with Disney, that they would threaten in some way to, I don't know, maybe take funding away from their campaign if they were funding their campaign before. And you just know that through the inner workings of those super PACs, people like Nikki Haley and Chris Christie would cave in a moment and give Disney whatever they want. And again, this is why I'm putting DeSantis in kind of this non-establishment role, because if you really look at what he's doing, he's basically saying, I don't give a crap about the money from you, Disney. I'm fighting you on social policies, which was the problem Republicans had forever, was that they weren't fighting on social policies. Why? Because these companies did not want them to, and they needed to follow the money. I mean, we're talking about the Koch brothers. I mean, all these BlackRock companies as well, that they fund Democrat candidates, but they fund Republican ones too. And his point about how the Republicans would have just caved to Disney was absolutely true.